Hello everyone, I'm Watchy and today we talk about Mythic Plus affixes. In this episode we will complete the analysis of the affixes of Season 2 with the ones unlocked from level 14. These effects trigger upon the death of any mob in the dungeon, but they will not affect any boss fight and will not be triggered during such encounters. In Bolstering Week, whenever a mob dies, it will apply a stack of the bolster buff to every mob still alive, within 30 yards, that will empower them to do 20% more damage for 20 seconds. This buff stacks, so consecutive deaths within the same pool before the timer expires will increase the damage dealt by all enemies. Usually the non-elite mobs and those summoned by other monsters will not trigger the bolstering buff, but they will benefit from it when it is applied. During Bolstering Week, the key to success is to avoid to be greedy in your pulls, because this might cause your tank getting hit heavily by the wrong mob that has 5 or 6 stacks of the bolster. Make sure you finish a pack before entering combat with a new one, because the stack of the last boss will apply to the new pack, making your life harder for a gain of a couple of seconds. Always prioritize damage to the stronger mob first if you are afraid of its ability to hit harder, and try to distribute your damage equally on all the mobs in the pack to kill them all at the same time and avoid spikes in damage taken. In Bursting Week, every time an enemy dies, it will apply a stack of the burst buff to all players that will deal shadow damage over 4 seconds. This buff is incremental, meaning that the subsequential deaths of mobs within the time frame will refresh the dot and increase its strength. The amount of damage increases with the level of the key, but not with the player's health, and is capped after level 15. Usually known as the healer affix, the fact that it is a magical dot means that it can be dispelled by a number of classes and abilities. Priest can use Mass Dispel every 45 seconds, allowing bigger pulls if the cooldown is up, and possibly clear out even 6 or 7 stacks with one click, but this of course needs coordination between the tank and the priest designated with the task. Mistweaver monks can use Revival every 3 seconds, and in addition, even if with a bit of more setup, Preservation Evokers can use Stasis. On top of this, other classes can fully negate this affix with a clever use of cooldowns. Rogues, paladins, hunters and mages can fully immune Bursting, Death Knight can use Anti-Magic Shell before the first stack is applied, and monks can use Diffuse Magic after it has been triggered. Also dwarves can use Stone Form to negate. If you don't have access to any of these, the only way to deal with Bursting is to not fully nuke all adds in one go, but to be careful and stagger the deaths as much as possible, and ideally not reach above 4 stacks to not give a hard time to your healers. Raging is probably the most straightforward of the affixes of this category. When enemies reach 30% of life remaining, they will become more deadly, and CC will not stop anymore the deadly cast they may have. The effect remains even if, for some reason, the mob gets healed past 30%. Several classes can dispel the enrage, such as druids with Soothe, evokers with Overawe and Oppressing Roar, rogues with Shiv, and hunters with Tranquilizing Shot. The best way to deal with this affix is to focus damage on those dangerous adds that once enraged can one-shot players with their uninterruptible abilities or spells, but make sure that not too many reach low health at the same time. Otherwise you will have to deal with more deadly mobs at once. During Sanguine Week, kill mobs will leave behind a puddle of blood that will heal them by 5% of their maximum health every second and damage players who stood in for 15% of their max health per second. If more than one puddle is stuck in the same place, the effect is additive, with catastrophic consequences. This affix is mainly handled by tanks that need to kite out of puddles the packs to avoid all of them healing back to the max. Ranged are safe by this effect, but melee needs as well to quickly get out of these puddles to avoid giving the healer extra unnecessary hard time. The hardest part of this affix is dealing with those mobs that tend not to move much and chain cast spell while staying on the spot. Grips, stones, interrupts or any displacement effects can be used to move them out of these pesky puddles of blood to avoid once again having mobs at full health constantly. Spiteful Week is probably the most annoying week for this category of affix. Upon death, mobs will spawn a Spiteful Shade that will fixate on a random player that once reached will be attacked in melee with hard-hitting swings. They can be killed quite easily, but they also lose 8% of their life total per second while chasing you, eventually despawning on their own. For ranged and healers, life is pretty easy because they can just kite them, but for melee is a bit harder since they need to be destroyed before it's too late, losing damage uptime on mobs. The annoying part is that while there are shadows still up, the party is still considered in combat, giving a hard time to healers who want to recover mana, or even to resurrect fallen allies. Also, some dungeon mechanics will not work, like freeing the prisoners in Brackeneye Hollow until all the shadows are dispatched. On a side note, Spiteful Shades can be CC'd, stunned and knocked back, to allow them depleting their own health over time. If you found this video useful, make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this. Have fun in Mythic Plus,